Good afternoon, everybody. So glad that you joined us. I think the previous panelist mentioned how it's between us and the cocktails, right? So rather than call this a graveyard shift, I choose to call it the happy hour shift. And a very important and pertinent topic, I think, that's emerged. The financial industry, just like an onion, is one of those environments that you kind of peel one layer and it exposes another problem or another challenge. And you think you solve that one and it exposes another one, right? So historically, ironically, the conversation I was having with my panelists, which I will introduce shortly, was how financial markets traditionally and financial industry in general never really had to worry about competing for talent because it's almost the destination that talent would be gunning for. You know, people who would leave other industries to go into financial services, salaries were more of a premium there, and so you never saw an exodus, you saw more of the reverse problem. Interesting how now, with all the challenges that we've been discussing throughout the day, increased regulation, much more tighter margins, liquidity challenges, externalization of so many things, now brings the challenge also of externalization of skills and talent. And in a market that's already challenged and constrained, you're finding that it is probably the next frontier that all of us need to collaborate and chat about, beyond our internal let's say, competitive dynamics, but rather look at it at an industry perspective. So what we're hoping to have is an engaging conversation. Please do lean in, send us questions via the WhatsApp text. I may even call on a few of you, so please stay on your toes. But really just to walk out, hopefully, with a collective call to arms, something to act upon, that next year when we come back, we can say we've done a few things as a collective, and these are the strides that we've made in that direction. So I'm joined this afternoon by Thembi Manyike, who is the head of talent acquisition and strategic transformation at Santam. So we've got a talent practitioner through and through. She's worked throughout financial services in different environments, as well as a man who needs very little introduction in this forum, Rufaro Mapanda, who is head of equity trading and global markets at Absa. And I know you are extremely passionate about this topic, having been not only somebody who's been through it from your career's perspective, but also champions a lot of the initiatives around development of skills and what do we do for the next generation of talent coming through. So as I mentioned before, I think the concentration that we're seeing in the industry, we're down to 41 brokers from a sell-side perspective, and the top 10 take the lion's share of the flow, the activity. And the question is, for those 31, we've discussed everything else that they are absolutely facing in terms of just financial sustainability as entities. Now there's the added dimension that hanging on to the talent that they've groomed is a challenge. Sometimes to the local bigger players, but very often to internationals who themselves are seeing the pressures of global markets and oftentimes offshore certain capabilities and rather remotely kind of serve various jurisdictions as a result. So with that, in addition to the non-traditional competition that we're seeing, where fintechs are becoming sexier to actually go work at, the type of skills that are required there are valuable. So the first question I guess I want to place to you, Rufaro, from what you've seen and the dynamics of where the markets are going, we were talking about how, usually we'd see an inflow and now we're seeing an outflow. And what are your perceptions about that and some of the opportunities that we could take advantage of?
Thank you. Thank you, Itu, and thank you to everyone for having me back again this year. Felt it. And particularly this topic, I remember Andres earlier was talking about how important data and technology are. And then Mark was like, what about the people? And I'm always, ever since I joined the industry, I've always said, I found out about the money later. You know, when somebody said I'd retire at 30, but I'm still here. But why I wanted to do this was very simple when I started. My parents were doctors. They were in charge of people's health. Then the economy messed up and we lived in mining town and after people were unemployed. And I was like, well, this is all useless. What's the point of being a doctor if people can't stay alive? So I said, let me look for a job, you know, where you take care of the health of the bigger economy. You know, and when I started working, that seemed to me like the banks. You know, the banks managed the health of the economy. And that was the draw card to me, as in what we were meant to do there, you know, what the purpose we were serving. And I don't think that's changed. I think that's not what the bank was selling when I started. You know, the first thing Tony said to me was, you'll be able to buy a BMW in 6 months. And then Merrill Lynch crashed 6 months later, so that was a lie. But what kept me in it was this hope that we could fix it. And when juniors come to us, and now it's weird. We always used to have engineers with us in these interviews, and they always used to say, "Just want to get paid." You know, the accountants wanted to get paid, and that hasn't changed. The engineers are still applying. You know, the doctors are still applying for it. And if you want, you can take that conversation to a monetary thing. But most times, people are looking for meaning. And I think our industry has a lot of meaning. I think we just never defined it. You know, we as an industry, you know, we're financial practitioners. But do we say that when we meet? Or do we take the values of where we work? You know, are people identified as a Standard Bank person, as an Absa person, as a JSE person? And so when people come to our industry, there's nothing holding, there's no moat. There's no moat of values. You know, there's Absa values, you know, and I feel like if we define that as an industry, we have a lot to give. And I don't think in this war of talent, we would be losing. I think on any value proposition, we shouldn't be losing. And that's where my values are.
Well, thank you for that. Interesting. Because you worked for an international and localized yourself in a sense, right? Which is the direction that we didn't expect from most. And I think you are still an anomaly that, you know, you went in with not money in your mind, but that's a different dynamic. With that in mind, though, the observation is that there are a lot of initiatives at a grassroots level. There are grad programs everywhere, right? Coronation has a big scale one where there's collaborative input across the industry. 91 also has one. So the challenge isn't so much to bring them in. I don't think the challenge is also necessarily to train and to expose talent to skills. There's a generational dynamic, though, which I think is different to, you know, I've been in financial services for 20 years, and before that was in management consulting. Now, value was, you know, stick it out, learn deep skills, and then, you know, you can then contribute actually much more fruitfully. The argument would be that that generation is not the type of mindset that wants to stick it out for long. So with that in mind, though, understanding that our environment and our financial industry has global credibility, has had for many, many years, based on the deep level of expertise that it has. How do we get that expertise pipeline and retain it so that the credibility can be maintained? As a sourcing specialist and somebody who's been in talent acquisition for many years, Thembi, do you have any kind of, let's say, comments and insights as to what would we do differently for the generation that's joining now relative to the people who would join a place, learn the thing inside out, develop their expertise over a decade plus, and add value?
Thank you for that. So I think one of the things that is a blessing with this generation is that they speak up. They tell you what they want. I know sometimes organizations complain about being surveyed out and etc. The voice of the candidates is very, very important. So if you listen to them, they've put things out there to say, first, I want to go into an organization where I can see people who look like me. So leadership is critical. I want to look at the top and say, oh, there's a future for me there, right? I want to go into a role where I don't feel like I am stifled. They want innovation. They want to know, you chose me. I'm an engineer. I'm an actuarial grad. You chose me and said I'm intelligent. Then I come in and then you want to stifle my innovation. And then you're telling me that, no, when we spoke about innovation, we're saying, you can change this, but stick to that. These are the rules. There's a framework. There's a this, that, right? And then they think, but I'm not going to stay for that.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the other things is they're looking for various opportunities. And we become so caught up in this moment, my department, my cluster, that we fail to share the skill. We fail to boost candidates internally. So every single time you get an opportunity, you go and buy a candidate instead of boosting what you have internally, instead of building what you have. So we struggle to firstly ensure that the people we have here are growing. You cannot find a ready-made product. And I sitting in interviews and my managers are like, Thembi, I need somebody's going to hit the ground running. They may still not be running themselves. So we also need to stop that narrative, because if you are raising a group of very verbal, very authentic, very outspoken individuals, you need to allow them that opportunity where they're going to come in and really showcase their true capability. As much as you think that they don't talk money, or they do talk about money, they not bait on that. They say, I need the opportunity. Money's going to come, but I need the opportunity. But the other thing is they're also trying to move away from the traditional. You spoke about that generation that came before. The traditional employee is no longer there. And it's this one that's coming in who, part of being traditional means I need to also push my entrepreneurial flag.
Yeah.
So how then, as an organization, do we engage those people? Because if I push that and I allow you to feel like you're free, you deliver this work, but I can also allow you to bring in your entrepreneurial flair. I may get more from you than what I'm getting currently. Because right now you're concentrating on, if I was to go and do this side hustle, and then you're not delivering, right? Because that's where your focus is. They're all thinking, I need double income. How am I going to do that? But if, as an employer, you address that, because that's what they're asking us to do, address that issue. How can you solution for me in line with all the policies that we have? I'll do right by you if you do right by me.
You raise a really pertinent point of no one's a ready-made product, right? I think we feel it most pertinently at the JSE. You can come from anywhere in financial markets. It's different when you come on the inside relative to when you engaged with us as a member. And there's a learning curve to that. And so I think in our environment, we often see that there's a learning curve, there's a trajectory, but then just at the point where the person has learned all the things that they need to learn to really add value and elevate, they get itchy feet because you're a small organization. Now, there are many entities in this room that probably share that dilemma, that we're all small, a 50-man shop, a 20-person shop, and so you can bring the talent in, but for them to actually feel like they are progressing, there aren't as many opportunities from a role perspective. So how do we make that an industry-wide problem rather than a competitive problem? Like you said, we can't keep throwing money at the problem and poaching each other's people, because that has an end state, and what it does is artificially inflate the price tag that goes to the skills that we have locally. Is it a feasibility, Rufaro, that somewhere in the industry we decide that you can start at Absa, maybe come to the JSE for a little bit, go to the FISCA, and then come back and go to R&B, but it's all intentional. It's all cooperative in a sense, rather than, it happens because the person gets itchy feet. They can't wait for the person who's been the market specialist for 20 years to go on retirement, and they need the skills to go laterally almost to be built to get a better base of their experience to be a better leader in a specific vertical. Is it realistic, or am I being a little bit, idealistic in a sense?
In a nutshell, it's realistic. I think a lot of times we always wait for some greater being to do things on our behalf. And Absa did a study we did was a survey. And we asked people, we asked people in a wild way to get their view on things. And we realized that departmental or small team culture drives people's behaviors more than organizational culture.
Okay.
So a lot of times people think, Absa can do this, Lasika can't, JP Morgan can do this, but it's those cultures and those decisions are normally driven by the people in this room. There's no other person than the people in this room who can drive those changes. I sat for Absa for 10 years. When I first arrived, I was like, somebody should empower the juniors. Somebody.
And you are that body.
Yeah, we'd be complaining like, oh, we've lost another kid. Oh, can't believe the CEO has done something about this. And then eventually I woke up and I was like, well, this guy isn't coming.
Yeah.
It's us. This continual learning dream coming from heaven is not coming. I am the continual learning. I'm the guy who must do the masters, so the juniors do the masters, so that they believe it's normal, so that they want to stay, so that they see a trader doing surveys, so that they see a trader doing sales. Because if I wait for the organization to do it, it's not going to happen. That's not what organizations are meant to do. That's what people do. So I've gotten this decision now where I'm like, the people in this room, so I think there are 10 people in this room, and they raised their hands, I've been hounding them. I nearly got to Erica later on. When I was like, a lot of things we say should be done in the industry can only be done by us.
Yeah.
I sat next to Erica and I watched her talking to us about what stockbrokers would do. And after she left, people were like, oh, this should be happening more. And then I was like, well, are you going to go see her next week? So I think a lot of these industry, or the industry is us.
Yes.
And for a long time, I think we've never defined who the industry is. You are financial practitioners, whether you're buy side or sell side or sandwich side, you're all financial practitioners. And if you don't define that for yourself, there's no one's coming to save us.
Yeah.
I have a great example of this. The Springboks. There was a time when the Springboks were lost. I don't think you guys wore jerseys before 2017. And no one saved them. A bunch of guys and their coach saved itself. You can say a lot about Rassi, but he sat in the room and he said, no one is coming to save us. If we wait here, all of you will be praying in France for 10 years. And they changed their own culture. They changed their own, they identified themselves as nation builders. They turned the sport of throwing around the ball into nation savers. They changed their identity of sportsmen. Now all of us went to watch the netball. We even supported Bafana because of the ball. Right? And when I say that, I'm like, they did it. There was no consultant, no McKinsey, no amount of that consultant. They sat in a room and said, we are losing our players. People are complaining that kids are being picked from Grey High School to go and play in France.
Yeah.
Try go to Grey now and get a kid from France. He wants to be a Bok. Not because the pay got better, not because of some strange phenomenon, but because they redefined who they are and they have a clear identity. If you're a Bok, you're a patriot. You serve the national interest. Is that what this industry stands for?
Right. Absolutely.
There's no magical place where this is going to happen. It's got to be me going to Erica and saying, what do you need? Are there enough people doing the stockbrokers exam? They're not going to do it if it's not cool. Let's get 4 cool guys to do this. Let's make sure LinkedIn sees everyone on this. That's how the CAs reinvented their profession.
Sure.
And I think if we sit and wait for that to happen, it's not going to happen.
I think you make really, really exciting points. And Erica, lots of work for you. But I mean, Erica was talking about the concept of a shared service. And I think maybe it wasn't necessarily focused on beyond technology and some operational aspects, but there must be some sort of shared talent pool that we apply our minds to. And I'm not just speaking about at a junior level. The challenge we're finding is that at senior manager level, people are either leaving the country or leaving the industry. And how then do we get the next generation of doyens? I mean, there are lots of people in this room that have the deepest knowledge of this industry that's unparalleled. But when they retire, what happens after that? And from what I've seen, this industry is one of those where you learn shoulder to shoulder with somebody. You've got to sit next to somebody who's been trading for 10 years plus when you're learning to see how it's done. It's not something you can do remotely or learn by just, osmosis or a colleague of mine used to say auto-magically. It doesn't happen. So the intentionality of that is a thing. And so how do we get that right as an industry? How do we start having cross-organizational career pathing that's more intentional, understanding that the throughput can be much bigger than one organization can manage on their own? And at the same time, acknowledging that we're feeding and we're creating a pipeline of skills for beyond just the industry, but we'll be able to retain enough of the deep skills that we require, rather than what we're seeing now. The other additional complication is, of course, that just last week, the Department of Home Affairs released a draft second amendment of the Immigration Regulations Act for public comment. And it really speaks to changing the visa requirements and making kind of South Africa an accessible skills destination. So basically, digital nomads and people classified as critical skills based on a point system will be able to work from anywhere else in the world and work in South Africa. And so it'll be based on certain criteria. But that on its own, I think, exacerbates the challenge that we highlighted earlier of externalization of the talent that we have. And that in the context of locally relevant understanding and making sure that, understanding historically, and earlier on in the panel, I think in the morning, where it was mentioned that the differentiator now is the relationships that you have on the ground, the relationships you have locally. So without that, how do we better enable the local talent to continue in the journey of relationship building, localization of skills, and ensuring that we don't have, one, unsupervised bots from somewhere else, maybe doing something that isn't necessarily relevant, but secondly, retaining the depth that will continue making our markets relevant. Thembi?
Firstly, I want to maybe link to what Rufaro was saying around that program to assist people to grow, right? You asked the question to say, how does the industry do it? And you are right. Collaborated career path journey for people is important, where one can move from one organization to the other and learn something. We continuously talk about the skills gap, and nobody's coming through to say this is the skill and the gap is this big. But as we move people along, they learn different cultures, they learn different skills. Maybe in showcasing all of that in various organizations, they're picking up a little bit of that and this. And that's where this skill is coming together, right? But like you said, it needs to be intentional. We need to do things like performance management, right? And stop seeing it as a negative thing. We need to make sure that people have development plans. So when I take you from Standard Bank and I send you to Absa, you are taking that document with you to say, this is what I've done, right? And as you get that side, goals need to be set. When you leave that side, they need to say, this is how you've developed, this is how you've grown. In fact, you've also taught us something new. At the end of all of this, we then need to talk to say, okay, we had Thembi, Itumeleng, and all these other people in our organizations. Over a period of time, what we've seen is Itumeleng thrives in this area, so that you don't become selfish again. No, Itumeleng is asking, if she thrived in another company, let's be open to allowing her to go there, because the industry benefits. So that is some of the things that we probably need to consider. Like you were saying, if there are things that we're going to take on and bring this conversation here next year, we maybe should have made traction towards an integrated career path journey for individuals, right? So that's the one. The visa thing, it's great. It's a great thought, right? It's going to bring in money. It's going to create career opportunities. And yes, even in South Africa, we've got digital nomads. We've got them here. We are complaining about unemployment. So it's got its benefits, but this may just create more unemployment for South Africans. One of my other concerns is that it does not address employment equity. Because if you are now importing skills, we have ambitious transformation targets as various organizations, and employment equity is critical. So we already have organizations that find every excuse not to fulfill the employment equity targets. This might just add on to that, right? So we need to look at it broadly. We need to see the benefit of bringing in the skill that we need, but we also must not forget to develop the skill that we currently have. Because when we bring in people from internationally and we don't have things in place to make sure that they transfer skills. So for example, talking about a skills transfer plan, or within their goals or KPIs to say, we'd like to have you here for 3 to 5 years, but in that time, you need to transfer the skill. This is how we're going to measure this transfer of skill.
Right.
And it is linked to your pocket. Until it's linked to people's pockets, people do not deliver on that. So these things need to be discussed broadly. We definitely need to have more skills that come into the country, but we also need to make sure that that does not stifle the skill that we have here. Again, let's boost what we have. Let's invest more money, because the money that you're going to spend on relocation costs and all of those things, bring it in and develop that graduate program, add more to whatever. And you were saying, I think it was you, Itumeleng, was saying that it doesn't have to start at graduate level. Even the middle managers who are the pipeline to senior management, etc. Put in something like an academy, an investment academy, so that they can also upskill themselves. You find that there's people who are sitting in a particular department, maybe in enabling services or shared services, who have a vested interest in wanting to understand and grow the business, but they're not seeing those opportunities because nobody talks about it. But if you start reshuffling people in the organization and you review the skills that you have, and internally do things like internal career fairs, you will see that people are going to raise their hands. You may not need to go outside to look for the skill, because the skill is saying, I'm here, I'm invested, I know who you are, I am part of your culture. Just develop me, invest in me, and I'll showcase to you who I am.
Yeah. I know the buy side probably has less of this challenge, because typically those organizations are quite vast, quite big. You can move around in various departments a little bit more. I'm seeing kind of like the broking firms, I think, having more of a challenge, because some of them are quite niche, some of them are quite small. We're speaking big names here, but like a Vunani, a Navigar, a Perisec is getting big. But on the front of how do we make sure that what are starting to emerge as dying skills are better preserved as an industry. I think research analysts is one, right? With MiFID coming, it's made things much more difficult. It was always seen as a very competitive capability to have in your arsenal versus your competitors. But now that that has its challenges and hurdles, how do we still maintain a base of analysts in the industry that can speak on behalf of all our listed issuers that aren't dual listed, that need boots on the ground, who don't just kind of go read the annual statements and run the models in terms of financials, but can actually walk the floor and understand that what makes this organization uniquely competitive on a global stage is the culture, and they understand the value chain of that organization, they understand the client base, they understand the executive team. With that dying, I mean, is that what we've proposed as maybe a industry base of skills to be developed, a feasible outcome that could be leveraged? Rufaro, what are your thoughts there?
With that one, I think I feel like the other local banks have seen it like this. It's probably moved more from the international banks to the local banks. It's been a hard sell, obviously, because research analysts have been traditionally very expensive.
Yeah.
But in pushing that knowledge, I think one of the key values of most banks these days is knowledge sharing. And you can't do that without a research base. So it's almost involved, especially at Absa, reimagining who pays for the research analyst. In so much as the knowledge of these companies is as necessary as it is for institutional investors, as it is for the bank itself. Whether it's corporate finance or the retail part of the bank, they all need this inner image. So I think each local bank has navigated that largely the same. It is a hard solve for anyone who isn't a bank, because there's not as much bread, so to speak, to spread the margarine on, to carry that cost. Analysts will always be analysts. They take a long time to train. Inherently, I have pushed, even when I speak to other banks, that we should carry that. Especially because for so long we existed in silos, right? You'd always find that if a head of a product was trading, the other products would suffer. The research would get underpaid, and then people would leave. Then if you became a salesperson, only the salespeople have been paid. In growing that bank that's entrepreneurial, or that team that's entrepreneurial, you have to have everyone understanding what people do, which for me is actually perfect. It's why I'll even say we and people on the ground at Absa had to break down the silos. We had to say, you'd rather this person in the FX wants to trade equities. It's okay. You know, it's not a reflection on you as a manager. It's a reflection on you of the manager if you let the person come on. You know, let them learn, let them understand how the bank works. Because now we have that shared understanding of financial services. You understand why it's empirical, that research as a national function is important. You understand why China sponsors people research, because that's what gives it its edge. You know, so I think it's why I keep bringing up this national interest thing, because I think if we all start thinking the national interest, it becomes clearer what your role is as a person, who you need to speak for, why you're not getting paid for it. You know, I still care about my kids, but I still think that in it, if you really care about money, you care about the continuance of it coming for your own children. Yes, you need a South Africa that works, which needs an Africa that works. You know, so the African interest and the national interest should be primary.
Okay. Yeah. No, it was very helpful. Thembi, this national interest and the collective interest, we have a common problem. How do we solve for it in a way that bolsters not only the economy, but the entities operating in the economy? You've worked on both sides, like public sector and private sector, and we've had other conversations over the past couple of days around why is it that we don't have enough skills going from practice to regulation and back out again. And in other countries, actually, that fluidity works really, really well for the markets and for whatever industry that's in question, because you need regulators to almost understand the application of what they're putting out and whether it's an enabler. And it's usually a positive thing if you've got deep experience in practice before you come and regulate. But we're not seeing that flow back and forth. From your lived experience, what have been the challenges of why people don't go one way or the other?
Sure. So I think the first thing, one of the biggest things that I've seen change is around how people are positioned the employer brands.
Okay.
Right? We take for granted the impact of your employer brand. I think in the past, there were organizations who, like you said earlier, were very comfortable because they knew people will come to us because we've got a big name, because of who we are. But now they've got options. The skills that you require, the skills that many other institutions want, and if I'm going to look at them, I'm going to look at my options. I'm going to see what the culture is like. You spoke earlier about the fact that I think something around the hybrid way of working. And for the workforce now, it's a big issue. It's a contentious issue in other institutions, but it's something that they want to talk about. So what we are finding in our industry, I know in banking, they're still working a lot from home, right? We'd like our people back in the office. And as part of our value proposition, we position it in the recruitment process. It's a struggle. But what we're saying is we cannot upskill you entirely virtually. We need you here so that you can understand our culture, you can understand who we are, you can take it in as well, right? Then you've got the various benefits. So people are also looking at differentiated reward philosophies. And again, the banking space, you've got the free banking thing up front, and then the discounts on the mortgage and things like that. There are companies who have now adopted these new ways from the banks that are saying, okay, I'm going to give you over and above your cost to company, I'm going to give you an allowance to sort out those issues. Like you can put it towards your mortgage, you can put it towards your legal fees if you're going through something, but it's over and above. Like this is part of the retention strategy. So you need to look at other opportunities where you can retain your workforce. Teach them about the various training opportunities that are on offer in this institution or in the organization. Other organizations are also promoting their leaders. I mean, if you go onto the likes of LinkedIn, how people on the live page, how people showcase the likes of Rufaro, and if you've got a young group of talented individuals who have a keen interest in the work that he does, they will follow him where he goes, right? So they'll always leave, and if he leaves Absa, they will follow him. I'm not saying anybody should recruit you to another company. I'm just saying that there is a pool of talent that is willing to follow you wherever you go. And if you don't change internally, if you don't change your ways of work, if you don't change your behaviors as an internal organization, you'll always see the outflow and nothing coming in. And they will question this. I was joking yesterday at the event where I was saying, I sat in an interview where we asked a candidate, why did you choose this line manager over the other? Because both line managers were interested. This young one said, I saw some red flags with this line manager. That's what she said.
Yeah.
And what it then said to us, initially we laughed, like, oh, can you believe it? These ones talk about triggers and stuff. But what it then triggered us to do was to go and check this line manager out, because you may be the reason why people are not joining us. You may be the reason why they see us as a difficult employer, and then they don't come in, because word of mouth spreads very quickly. I can put out an advert, I can try, but what my people are saying about me, and they're not being ambassadors, is going to go out into the market. So it allows us to review ourselves, it allows us to do an intrinsic view of what we are doing and what we are not doing, and then work on that. And then by so doing, we can then go out into the market with something that is more viable, with something that positions us and our value proposition more concisely. But other than that, they will continuously flow out.
Thanks for that. So I'm going to ask for some closing thoughts. What I'd love as a call to action is for people to then leave here today almost committing to say, let's have a little working group and try figure this out. Let's try figure it out. The same way we have advisories on so many other topics in this market. How do we have an advisory on talent, and how do we start working on things that don't breach competition law, but really allow us to foster a pool of senior talent? Because junior talent, I don't think we're short of. The industry still attracts bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited individuals that get disillusioned somewhere along the line. How do we keep the talent in the industry, and also contribute towards regulatory direction?
A practical example, I think, is when I think of all the people, I've been in this industry for 20 years now, and when I think of all the people who trained me, and I look up, I only see Erica, and great job, Erica, great job. But I've always been like, where is everyone else? Where did
they go?
Where are all those guys from the Baron?
Yeah.
And it's hilarious to me that most of the kids call me Grootman, and I'm like, I'm 40, man.
Grootman.
I'm like, I've only been doing this for 20 years. There are guys who've been at their firm for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I almost feel the thing that when I find one of them and they're disgruntled about the industry, and they point to random things like, oh, no one values us anymore. I'm like, you haven't put yourself in a position to be valued. You haven't given back. The thing you're looking for is legacy, not pay.
Yeah.
I know it was sold to Wolf of Wall Street, you're all going to drive Lamborghinis and stuff, but that wasn't the selling point. The selling point is the body of knowledge. And I almost feel like if, you probably have a book with all their names, Erica. I almost feel like I would love to sit with these guys and say that to them, that the work that when you came and presented the market structure, I think that was perfect. But with Layla, I think there's another layer of the market structure, which is people, which is missing. For me to be looked at as a wise person, when the guy I look at as a wise person still has all his hairs muddy and he's only 50, there's a whole layer of other guys who are 60 where I don't know where they've gone. And I see them when I go to other countries. When I go to the UK and I go to the Old Bar, there's an old bunch of brokers who are always talking about the old days, but they're practical about the old days, not the midget throwing old days, the good old days.
Right.
And I'm like, and I think, practically speaking, if we had a work group on that, I would happily help on that, Erica.
Awesome.
And I think that is what will keep our talent in. It's easy. She's right. They come running in. I mean, we took in 18 grads last week. 12 of them have masters. It's ridiculous. These guys are 23. I mean, what are you a master of? I just became a master of myself. I'm not even a father yet, right? And I'm like, wow. Like, they look at me and I'm like, wow, you guys we're 4 doctorates. How are you a doctor at 23? Didn't you go and fight? And they're like, teach us. And I'm like, Lord, and I'm always like, well, I have a lot to say, but 18 years isn't a long time.
I hear you.
In this cycle of the industry, right? Like, I would love to have a place or a work group of Ericas where we're like, actually, this market trend you're seeing, They were bad times in 1989.
Okay.
It's happened before.
So I think that's one action. Erica with your black book and your file, and all the cohort that was there at the Baron, that was from, even the ones from Diagonal Street, like before we moved to Santam. Yeah, we want everybody in this collaborative. So there's an industry kind of education, mentorship, handing down of knowledge. I've heard reimagining of how certain roles get funded and financed and paid for. I've also heard around how do we make sure that at an industry level, because now it's the rubber hitting the tar. You've got to performance manage these people. And it's not just, Itumeleng at the JSE performance managing the person who's here for a couple of years who's going to go to the next place, but it's an industry-wide setting of standards of these are the competencies and skills that we need. This is how we give feedback into the pool about how, talent is progressing individually and as a collective. And I've heard about the intentionality of making sure that we can keep measuring and giving back. And it's not just about the money. Thembi, you get the last word.
I think one of the other things, if you're going to build this cohort, you need to make sure that it's very diverse, right? So that it allows for innovation. But, and I don't want to use this word, it's the easiest one in my mind, cater deployment.
Oh
Talking
dear.
about old people who are in the industry who need to come back and give back.
Yeah.
Right? They don't need to do much. Somebody can write a module for you. Right? From what they can simply write a module, send it to you on email, and then have somebody just play it out and train to you. So it's not complex. And chances are they are sitting there saying, I know so much more about 1, 2, 3. Okay, put it on paper. Or come speak to this cohort,
Right.
So don't exclude people, include them, because that allows diversification. The young, the old, the middle, wherever they are. Because if you don't do that, then you are going to lose critical skills that were there in the past. I mean, they can't just disappear, right? It really is maybe around the fact that we stopped reinforcing the skills transfer. Bring those people who carry that skill to come and bring it in. They're going to feel valued, and chances are they're going to bring in something better than what modules we've been buying from universities.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that wraps up the afternoon. There's exciting work that I think some of us are going to end up having in our KRAs, but we're very passionate about it, and so we'll take it forward. And I think it's not just a local thing. There are internationals that have a local base that can take the skills and give them exposure internationally and still bring back. So there are many models that we can actually follow, and we're really excited about taking that forward. So Erica will be pulling on you, we'll be pulling on everyone, Samadi, Tapo, Viwe, like everybody. Let's get together and figure out how we actually operationalize something at this scale. I believe that is the last panel. So Shahan, I'll hand back to you. Thank you very much.